From courtside of the virtual hardwood, it's the NLSC Podcast, a weekly show for basketball gamers and hardcore hoopheads. This is episode 573. I am Andrew, Forum, Andrew NLSC on X and Blue Sky. I'm joined as always by my co-host Derek, DV3 in the forum, and DV3G and DV384 on X. Derek, we've got some thoughts on basketball video games to lob out there, so please, tip us off.
Yeah, so we want to kick off today's show talking about some recent community connections that have taken place on the NLSC Discord, and we will follow that up with today's main topic. NBA Live 01 legend Roger Ward asked what the community considers to have the best and worst alley-oop mechanics in hoop game history. So Andrew, first, I want to give a quick shout out to WizCard Rush from the NLSC Discord. He was in the mood for some college basketball. It's March Madness, right? So he posted in the Connect Online portion of the Discord and asked, hey, anybody want to connect with me on a college basketball video game? Of course, I was totally up for it. So I connected with him for a game of NCAA Basketball 10, where I used Georgetown and he controlled Pitt. Andrew, in most college basketball games, I use Georgetown. I've been doing that since NCAA basketball on the Super Nintendo. Why? Because I was a huge fan of Georgetown initially because of Allen Iverson. Followed him in college, and it kind of made me glued to that team. So, yeah, naturally I had to choose them. We had a fun time. He has been connecting with much of the community and is always up for a game. And it's really awesome to see. We appreciate him for that. He also connected recently with Perdido from the NLSC Discord. And Perdido plans to connect with King J Mace on NBA 2K23 to play a retro all-star game between the 90s and 2000s. So, Andrew, we love seeing the community connect with each other. Obviously, Parsec helps that initiative. And people are consistently using that application in order to get games in together. I do want to say, though, before we start talking about what we've been playing together, because we've connected a lot over the last few weeks, NCAA Basketball 10, what great atmosphere. You know, we did the ESPN presentation, and Dick Vitale is amazing. He sounds like his real-life self on the mic. He gets you pumped up for the action. The crowd is super into it. It's the real ESPN presentation with the correct music, the correct pop-outs, the correct art. The pace of the game is great. That is such a strong basketball video game. In my opinion, I feel like they nailed it.
Yeah, it's a real shame that the series ended at that point. And of course it also has alternate CBS presentation as well. Very cool to have two networks in there. A lot of games over the years haven't even had one real network, so that was pretty cool to say the least. And I'm glad that I've been able to play it. In recent years, been able to finally collect it after I got a PS3 and was able to import it. It was actually a game that I covered during the previous season because the assets were coming through from EA Sports and the information was out there, but I was covering it knowing that I wouldn't be able to play it. Fortunately, I was wrong. In the long run, I have been able to play it. Really do enjoy that game. Though, as I said to you in our chat on X, I'm actually drawn to 09. As much as I prefer the gameplay of 10, I do enjoy NCAA Basketball 09 because of the classic teams. That really is a draw for me.
Yeah, and like I stated, I agree with you. I think that it's really cool to put, Michigan on the floor with not Chris Webber and not the Fab Five, even though it's obviously, them and whatnot, in Michigan State with Magic Johnson and his fro, the UCLA with Bill Walton. In fact, I uploaded a gameplay video to YouTube a while back where, my brother used UCLA and Bill Walton, and he was just absolutely torching me with him. You have, Birds, Indiana State Sycamores in the game, et cetera. So it's definitely, and like Drexler and Olajuwon, Houston and whatnot. So yeah, that is a super draw. I will say that I wish that NCAA Basketball 09's gameplay was as good as NBA Live 09's. I think that NCAA Basketball 09 is super janky. I think you would agree. I think that the animations are super stiff. I think it's, at times hard to do what you want on the floor, and also hard to make it look good in that game because of that. And I think that Live 09 just plays smoother and a better game of basketball. But yeah, those classic teams, major draw.
Yeah, still a little bit of NBA Live 08 in NCAA 09.
Quite a bit, actually. So, Andrew, we've been connecting a ton, over the last few weeks, and we're going to go over some of those connections right now. So, we played NBA 2K7, Celtics versus Timberwolves, pre-KG trade. So, we're using the Celtics, and we have Wally Zerbiak as one of our go-to guys. Not a bad thing, though. I mean, he's a former All-Star, right? He can shoot the rock and get to the rim and whatnot. We actually had a couple nice moves with him. We obviously have Paul Pierce on that team and Delonte West and whatnot. But naturally, Gerald Green stole the show. Why? Because Gerald Green is perfect for basketball video games. He's fast. He's athletic. He's going to dunk on you. In fact, we dunked on the computer multiple times with him. In that game, he can also shoot, which is one of his biggest weaknesses coming into the league. He could just not be a consistent shooter, and he had trouble getting to his spots. But in video games, you don't have to worry about that as much. So, in my opinion, our best and most fun player to use in that game was Gerald Green. And that Timberwolves team, I mean, they really needed to lean on KG, right? Overall, they were weak. They had Ricky Davis at that point. I actually think that he's the one who hurt us the most in that game. But yeah, 2K7, I think they went a little bit too dark with the graphics, kind of like NBA 2K15, but it is visually appealing. It has some awesome dunk animations, some awesome spin move shots that you can do. Shooting is not terrible in that game. It's fun to shoot the ball. Yeah, overall, NBA 2K7, like we stated last week, it's a strong game for the series. In fact, all the PS3 gen games for 2K were strong, in my opinion. We did end up losing that game, kind of trying to go for too many highlights, which is common for us. It's fun to do. Like, I definitely tried to hook Gerald Green up with some flashy alley-oops in key moments in the game. That's my fault. But, yeah, that was an interesting matchup.
I mean, I don't regret going for the highlights. I mean, obviously we do want to get the win. We are competitive like that, but come on, we're going to try for highlights. We want to share them with our fellow gamers. We want to have a good time on the virtual hardwood, so no regrets. We can always run that back. I'm sure we will. 2K7, as I said last week, has retroactively risen up my rankings. I do like 2K6 a little bit more, probably because I'm a bit more used to it, but I really got on a 2K7 kick last year and ended up covering it in Way Back Wednesday. 2K8, not so fond of, as I said, but still objectively a well-made game. I just haven't been able to get into it. But yeah, 2K7, I definitely want to play more of that with you, run that matchup back, and it is always fun to play with those underdog teams, isn't it?
It really is. In like pre-big trade scenarios
between the two,
right?
Yeah.
Because there's a reason why these teams dispersed. There's a reason why they blew it up. There's a reason why they went in a totally different direction. It's because they couldn't win with the pieces that they had. But sometimes those teams, like that Celtics team, can be super fun to put on the floor because they still had fun pieces, right? Gerald Green is way better in a video game than he was in real life. If he was that good in real life, the Celtics would have hung on to him, right?
Yeah.
Early on. But yeah, I don't understand why games go dark, right? Why they make the graphics like they did in NBA 2K15, why they did what they did in 2K7. NBA Live 2001 is another one. Sorry, Live 01 Legends. But that game, graphically, it's every stadium is dark, Andrew. The floors are dark. Everything is darker than it should be. I don't think that's as appealing to the eye. I don't think that you can get as immersed in that visual experience. I like when the arenas are bright. I like when it's more true to life, right? Like a game like NBA Live 16 to me pops, right? Same actually with NBA Live 15, but Live 16 to me, the arenas are bright, the floors are the right color for the most part, the crowd's super into it, etc. Yeah, I don't like that dark look.
Yeah, it's a weird stylistic choice, and I do wonder if developers think that it's more realistic, that it's grittier, more realistic lighting or something. Because it's not. That's the thing. Yeah.
Yeah, Live 19, right?
Yeah.
Like Live 18 is vibrant. Live 18 is immersive, and you get to Live 19, and all of a sudden, all the crowds are super darker than they are in real life. The floors are darker. It doesn't look right. It's not as immersive as it should be. So I think you would agree with that, and especially you as a fan who's a bigger fan of Live 18 anyway.
For sure. So it is very weird that they make that choice in games, and whether they think it's more realistic, whether it hides something about the models, hides something about some of the textures they're using. Maybe that, I'm not sure, but it definitely is a weird choice. And I prefer the vibrant look. It is what you see on TV. Even a team like the Lakers that traditionally uses that lighting that darkens the crowd, it's still bright, it's still vibrant on TV. So, yeah, I'm not sure what they're going for there.
So we also connected on NBA Live 09 using the Hawks versus the CPU Pacers. And obviously, you know what, Andrew? I'm a sucker for that Hawks team. An absolute sucker for a Mike Bibby, Joe Johnson, Josh Smith Hawks team. It's fun, right? Bibby's an exciting player, a truly capable scorer. He's fun to execute moves with. We got Josh Smith flying in and dunking on people and catching oops and swatting shots and being this incredible, versatile player. You know, we have Al Horford on that team, you know, rim protecting, and Marvin Williams stretching the floor for threes. And I am such a sucker for those Josh Smith Hawks teams, I will admit it. And so we used them. We had a blast. We won that game. We ended up beating the Pacers, who have Danny Granger and whatnot, and Troy Murphy. It's an interesting Pacers team. But I just thought that was such a fun game, getting out on the break with you and throwing oops. We had a couple really nice highlight plays with Josh Smith, one which was in the NLSC Top 10 Play of the Week. We did some nice skip passes for threes in the corner, some really nice defensive plays. That was a lot of fun. Every time I play NBA Live 09, it grows on me more. And at times, I prefer it over NBA Live 10 because of the pace of the action, and because I think it also looks better in many ways. The player models look better, the arenas look better, etc. But yeah, I think out of all the sessions that we had recently, I think NBA Live 09 was my favorite.
Oh, definitely up there. And I've also developed more of an appreciation for NBA Live 09, going back and playing it with you, rediscovering my roots as a retro gamer and enjoying old games, because I'm not just grinding in the latest NBA 2K, as I've said before, and you definitely helped me break that bad habit there, and that habit that really had me in a rut and not enjoying my basketball gaming as much as I wanted to and should be enjoying gaming. It is what it's all about after all. I love the windmills in NBA Live 09. I love that Josh Smith windmill. I've said it to you a couple of times, said it in the comments on the YouTube video. It was in the top 10 plays, actually, that windmill, and rightfully so. Really enjoy that animation. It's a close call with NBA Live 10 and NBA Live 09 for me. NBA Live 09 also has a much better post-game. They kind of lost that in 10, and that was a shame. Some of the feel of 10 I do enjoy a bit more. There are some more clunky moments in 09, but I still really do enjoy it on the sticks. Very overlooked in our community because we were reeling from the announcement that NBA Live 09 was going to be console only. We were hoping for that Xbox 360, PlayStation 3 version to finally come to PC. It didn't, although we did get NBA 2K9, and that tipped off that modding community and made sure that we were going to get 2K on PC moving forward, so that was nice. But Live 09, I ended up, I think, bummed about it as well, not coming to PC, and even though I did have an Xbox 360, not playing it as much. But no, I've really come to enjoy that game. It has retroactively started ranking up there for me as well, kind of like 2K7 has. And that Hawks team definitely is interesting, but I just don't like those jerseys. And they're not bad designs, really, but they just don't hit the same as other Hawks jerseys.
I love them.
Really?
I don't know what it is. I love the courts from the time. I love the jerseys. I love the alternate red, right? They have the blue and then they have the red.
True.
I just absolutely love it. And I don't know, Andrew, we talked about starting a season together on a game. I'm strongly looking at NBA Live 09 for that. I don't know. I'll have to take a look at how, the season mode works. We'll have to decide if we want to do like a fantasy draft or, take a default NBA team into the season and, play through it with injuries on and maybe make transactions, et cetera. But, I don't know why. I'm kind of drawn to Live 09 right now.
Well, I see it. No, I see the appeal, and I'd be up for it.
We also connected on NBA Live 95. Andrew hosted, and I just got to point something out. Parsec still surprises me, even after all of these years. Andrew is on the other side of the world. Andrew will tell you on this podcast that his internet sucks.
Yeah.
Andrew does not have strong internet, and it's not his fault. He has the best plan he can get. And he hosted, and could you even tell really that I was the client? I'd say I adjusted to the little bit of input lag probably within the first 2 minutes
Yep.
of the game. But then I started knocking down threes with Chris Mullin. And I started throwing it down with Chris Webber and Sprewell and whatnot. We used the Warriors versus the CPU Nets. That Warriors team is absolutely ridiculous in that game, even though Tim Hardaway was injured, so he never actually played with Sprewell, Mullin, and Webber. Of course, he's there for you, available on that Warriors roster. So you got Tim Hardaway, Latrell Sprewell, Chris Mullin, Chris Webber, Billy Owens, who was super underrated, right? During his NBA career, when he was healthy, he was a very good player, highly touted coming into the NBA as well. But yeah, how fun was that session? How great did Parsec work? And yeah, Live 95, like 30 years old now, and it can still bring it fun factor wise.
Oh, for sure. I've been sharing some footage from NBA Live 95 on a bit of a kick, and it's always getting great reception on social media or on YouTube. There's a lot of nostalgia for that game, rightfully so. A big jump after NBA Showdown, quite frankly, and bringing in the isometric camera angle, working off that modified FIFA engine as they were at the time. There are some issues with the Super Nintendo version, not enough fouls for one, and so the speed is kind of more soccer-like or hockey-like even, but still fantastic game that holds up so well. Such a blast with it. And those teams, we've talked before about the importance of having great teams to use and fun teams, appealing lineups to work with. 1994 season, obviously not my favourite. I was still kind of getting into basketball, more of a casual fan at that time. No Michael Jordan in the league, obviously, coming back the following year. But some really great teams in the NBA. I mean, that was such a golden age for the NBA, so it's no surprise. But those teams, a couple of middle-of-the-pack teams, really, although they both were doing okay that year. And the Warriors, I believe, won 50 games and made the playoffs as a lower seed. But such fun lineups. Maybe not so much going to the Warriors bench, a little bit of lack of depth there, but there's still a couple of great players there. Avery Johnson backing up Tim Hardaway, who, as you said, was actually inactive that season. But yeah, really drawn to that 94 Warriors team. What a great video game lineup.
Yeah, I mean, Jordan was out of the NBA, right? But the league was still full of stars. Right. You had Shaq and Penny with Orlando. You still had Hakeem and now joined by Drexler in Houston. There were still so many good teams and great players in the NBA. The Knicks were dominant at that time. Right. And they're incredibly fun to use in that game. In Seattle, you have Peyton and Kemp out there.
Of course.
And, the Celtics, even that season, that's the one year they had Neek, 94 and 95, Andrew. And I just want to make a point as well. I'm talking about the PC version that had the midseason updates, which is the one I play the most. We played the Super Nintendo version, which has the 93, 94 rosters, which still are great, by the way. Personally, for that game, I do prefer the PC version. I love that zoomed out camera view option, etc. But still, I had a blast on that game. That Warriors team is so fun, and I still think that it was a strong time in the NBA.
Tell you what, though, Billy Owens in that 1992 roster for NBA 2K10, he was really doing some damage against us when we faced the Warriors with the Supersonics. Not quite as dominant for us.
Yeah, he was their best player on NBA 2K10 in that 91-92 roster. That might need to be tweaked. I think he was a great player, right? I mean, he's an excellent player. He was the third pick in the first round of the NBA draft. Like I stated, highly touted coming into the NBA. But yeah, and he had some big nights. So I guess you can't argue it. We only played a couple games against them. So the other game that we connected on, again, with you hosting, Street Volume 2, we used Magic, Jordan, and Bill Walton, and we were against NBA stars. And the game never gets old, Andrew. The alley-oops, the dribble moves you can pull off, throwing it off the backboard to yourself, throwing it off the backboard on an alley-oop, just the variety of dunks, the game breaker options that you have, the fact that the game can be truly competitive, the fact that it's so fun to play defense on that game. You were having a blast. I could tell you were standing by the rim and you were like, I am going to block every single shot that comes my way. You were loving it. And meanwhile, I'm out on the perimeter swiping or pushing the offensive player. It's equally fun to play defense as it is offense. And that's the mark of a great basketball game. But yeah, we had a lot of great oops in that game. Walton swatting shots. Yeah, you can't beat Street Volume 2.
Do need to either play through that or punch in the cheat code to unlock more players on the emulator there. But that is a go-to trio. I'm not sure we'd want to play with anybody else, quite frankly. Maybe a different big man just to change it up, but we're definitely going to be Magic and his Ernest in that game. And speaking of the emulator, how good is PS2 emulation now? It's working so well. PS3 as well. Xbox 360, as we said before, is sadly lagging behind and not sure it's ever going to get there. But the PlayStation 2 emulator just working so well. To that point, I'm thinking of doing a video retrospective for the original NBA Street games, the original NBA Street trilogy. Of course, I did the video retrospective of Home Court, capturing video from my Xbox 360 with the Elgato, but trying to capture from PS2, I don't have a RetroTink or any other upscaler that comes through at good frame rate or resolution, so it's not really suitable for a video retrospective. But being able to use the emulator, capture the footage in HD, great frame rate, etc., and the fact that the game is working so well is more than playable. It's pretty much perfect at this point. Yeah, I just love the advances that have been made with PS2 emulation.
I feel like PS2 emulation has been strong in the past. I think it's always been good. But with the new interface, with the new updates and whatnot, you no longer have games randomly stuttering, right? You have more options as far as optimization at your disposal. Games like NBA Shootout 2004, which were basically unplayable on the old version of the emulator, where there were major graphics issues, etc., those are now playable on this updated version. In fact, you and I connected on NBA Shootout 2004 and used the Rockets, remember? And it looked and worked great. And games that didn't even work basically at all on the old version, like NBA Shootout 2001, NBA Shootout 2003, they now work on this one. Street Volume 2 on the old version used to give you random stuttering. It used to have crashing issues at times, etc. And now it just works perfect. So I am so impressed with emulation in 2025. The PS2 emulator is so strong. PS3, RPCS3 works amazing. We use it all the time to connect. PS1 emulator is just as strong as the PS2 emulator now. Super NES, Sega Genesis, NES, N64. My brothers and I connect and play F-Zero on the N64, and it works great. We've connected and played GoldenEye recently because that was a childhood favorite. That works great. The only one that I would say that's kind of lagging behind is XEMU, the Xbox emulator. Some games work, some games don't. It lacks in optimization options, etc. And Xenia, the Xbox 360 emulator, I think they are far behind the RPCS3, PS3 emulator. There's major audio issues. There's audio issues with pretty much every game that I've tried with it. Graphics issues, optimization issues. So hopefully at some point, XEMU and Xenia catch up as far as quality.
Definitely, and obviously we have these games, the original copies of them, we can play them on original hardware, and that is fun too. In 2025, I do have the console set up, switching between them on my TV and playing on original hardware, but emulation is certainly convenient for all of the upscaling options, the convenience of being able to switch games very quickly, and for game preservation, that's a big deal. We want to play these games for years to come, so emulation is really helpful there.
Lastly, we connected on NBA Live 06 PC, which is a go-to and one of our favorites, and we used a 97-98 mod where we controlled the Bulls versus the CPU Jazz, and I thought that worked out really well. The art looks great. I do think that Karl Malone probably should have shot a little bit more. I think he only shot a few shots the entire game. It was actually John Stockton who was taking probably about 70 to 80% of his team shots. And it wasn't based on the defense that we were playing. There were plenty of opportunities where Malone could have gotten the ball, but Stockton was just firing from all over the floor. However, using the Bulls felt like, hey, we're using the 97-98 Bulls. And we had some nice dunks with Jordan, some great plays with Pippen on the defensive end, some good rebounds and putbacks with Rodman. Live 06 PC is such a strong game mechanically. And it can be just as fun in that game as well to play defense as playing offense, because it has some of the best, if not the best, steal mechanics in NBA Live game history.
I was going to say, I know you're a fan of those.
Crazy. Just awesome, fun steal mechanics and pretty good block mechanics. It also has, and we're going to get to this in a little bit, it also has outstanding alley-oop mechanics. But yeah, that was a fun session, Andrew.
Yeah, shout out to Tony D. I'm not sure if he's still in the community or listening to the podcast, but put together a pretty good roster there. Maybe some of the primacy attributes, because that was a hidden attribute in Live 06, not their best idea for roster editing, and there is primacy recalculation, which is a measure to make sure that shots are redistributed in Dynasty if players are injured or traded, but that can cause problems with the wrong players ending up taking too many shots when it recalculates those primacy ratings. But even so, still a very fun session. Loved the 98 season. Obviously, a lot of nostalgia for that, and nostalgia on top of nostalgia with Live 06 PC. Yeah, for my money, still one of the best all-around releases in the NBA Live series. When people talk about NBA Live 06, Derek, they often talk about the Xbox 360 version, understandably so, because that was the big new-gen release, and it does have those shortcomings, so that's what people remember. I do think that game holds up a little bit better than a lot of people remember, because they are looking at the lack of depth, understandably so, but it is still fairly solid on the court, even without freestyle superstars, but I still rank the PC version ahead of it, and ahead of a lot of games for that matter. It is still my all-time favorite game, although it really is competing with NBA 2K17 and NBA 2K14 for PS4 these days. But yeah, it was a lot of fun to find that in the archives. I am looking to put together some retro rosters for Live 06 myself, so sourcing some of the assets that are already out there in the community, obviously, and found that roster. I'd forgotten all about it. So yeah, that was fun to connect on that and play.
And how great is it that we live on opposite sides of the world and that we can do this?
Mind-blowing.
I'm still blown away by that fact. The fact that it works so well. The games are playable. Shout out to Parsec. Shout out to the people that work on these emulators, etc. I think it's just absolutely amazing that we can do this, and then also record that footage and share it with the community. It's excellent.
Before we go on, a reminder that the NLSC podcast comes out every week on the NLSC, nba-live.com, as well as our YouTube channel. We're also on Spotify, Apple Podcasts, and other podcast apps. If you're listening on any of those apps, we'd greatly appreciate a review. To keep up with the show and everything we're doing with basketball gaming in general, connect with us on social media. On Twitter and Facebook, we are the NLSC. We also have an Instagram, NLSC Basketball, and on YouTube, we're youtube.com/NBA Live Series Center. Once again, visit us at nba-live.com, where in addition to the podcast, you'll also find all of our original content, as well as our forum and modding community.
So, Andrew, before we get into the alley-oop mechanic discussion, we had a topic suggestion submitted by NLSC podcast listener Renee. And what he wanted us to do was a Q&A. He wanted to have the community ask you and I questions, and then we answer them on the show. And we actually had so many questions that we decided we're going to center next week's show around the Q&A. So next week's show will be dedicated to that. But let's get into the best and worst alley-oop mechanics in basketball video game history. I probably should have excluded arcade games. Because in reality, those games are just a different bag. However, I think it's still relevant to talk about them when we read off the community's responses, as several arcade games were mentioned. So, Andrew, I actually broke this down between top 3 best for the NBA Live series, top 3 best for the NBA 2K series, and the top 3 worst for both of those series. And the reason why I'm doing that is because these were the most commonly played basketball video games, right? If we talk about games like ESPN NBA Tonight, right? If we talk about the Shootout series, etc., I think that this topic gets a little bit too complicated. So I stuck with just the NBA Live series and NBA 2K series, and I did not bring up any arcade games. So I'll start really quick. So for me, the best alley-oop mechanics in NBA Live history are NBA Live 06, PC, PS2, Xbox. Why, Andrew? Because they work as they should. Obviously, if you throw an alley-oop and the guy is not close enough to the basket and you expect him to take off and throw it down from that distance, he might go into a layup, right? Like, I expect that in that game if I throw the alley-oop too early. But overall, NBA Live 06, throwing alley-oops to players that are standing under the rim, throwing alley-oops to people on the move, it just makes sense to me. I love the alley-oop controls in that game. I love getting out on the break. I think there's a lot of really cool alley-oop dunk animations in that game. So for me, number one best in the NBA Live series is Live 06. Second is NBA Live 05. And I'm going to tell you why it makes it as number two on my list. Because it's the best way to run fast breaks in that game. Because if you don't throw an alley-oop, the receiver often stops to catch the pass, and it interrupts the flow of the fast break. But when you throw an alley-oop, like when we connected and used the Nuggets versus the CPU, it makes the player continue towards the rim. I think that, once again, great dunk animations off of the alley-oops. I think they're thrown at a realistic pace, and I don't think you get too many layups when you throw oops in that game. So Live 05 is number two, and then number three, NBA Live 18, PS4, Xbox One. Why? Because they went to the 2K controls for alley-oops, and that was a difference maker, wasn't it?
Huge.
You know, the ability to double tap Y or double tap triangle, depending on which controller that you were using. It just made throwing alley-oops make more sense. And I know you love NBA Live 18, and I've seen your highlights and I see the alley-oops you throw. As far as the way the players gather their feet to jump for the oop, as far as the way they finish the oop, the variety you get in animations, I think that Live 18 is very strong for throwing oops. In fact, you and I controlled the Lakers versus the CPU on Live 18 when we were connecting using the Xbox One app, and we threw several alley-oops that looked awesome to Julius Randle and Brandon Ingram from Lonzo Ball, etc. So, I'm going to go with number three best NBA Live 18.
Yeah, it's hard to disagree with those choices, and I was going to say 06 and 18. In fact, that generation, that mid-2000s generation of Live, 2004, 2005, and 06, all pretty strong. And I brought up the Xbox 360 version of Live 06, and the alley-oops are pretty fun in that game as well. We had a really long one from about mid-court, I believe, playing with the Blazers. That was a lot of fun. That was very satisfying to pull off. So alley-oops pretty strong in that generation of Lives. As an honorable mention, I'll throw out Live 2002, the first game with that dedicated alley-oop button, and I just remember trying to throw lobs all the time in my 2002 Kings franchise. Throw it to Weber, throw it to Divac even. So, yeah, Live 2002 is an honorable mention in this category.
So NBA Live 06 for the 360, that alley-oop we threw with the Trailblazers was actually from three-quarter court.
Oh, that's right.
That's how ridiculous that was. And I want to say it was to Darius Miles, but I'm not 100% sure. But that was one of the best alley-oops I've seen in a video game. I also want to point out why NBA Live 2004 is not the best or the worst. I think that Live 2004 has pretty good alley-oop mechanics, but I feel like you miss too many dunks off of them. I feel like you'll throw the perfect alley-oop, and you can expect the guy to catch it and brick the dunk 25% of the time, right?
Yeah.
Maybe sometimes more.
And it doesn't matter
how.
Yeah.
Yeah. But I think that that's the biggest weakness with the Live 2004 alley-oop system.
Agreed.
So for the NBA 2K series, the three best, I have NBA 2K19 as number one, NBA 2K16 as number two, and 2K17 as number three. So NBA 2K19, obviously we talked about those great alley-oop controls that NBA Live 18 borrowed, the double tapping of the Y or triangle depending on which control you're using. But what's great about NBA 2K19 is your players are not getting stuck on each other that often. I feel like they're taking off realistically. I feel like throwing alley-oops with your back to the basket and the post, etc. Think about great passing big men that have pulled those alley-oops off in the past, players like Chris Webber. etc. I think that they work the best in that game out of any 2K game that I have played. 2K19 is pre-dunk meter, obviously, because that was introduced in the NBA 2K games on the PS5 generation of 2Ks. And so, yeah, 2K19 is number one. 2K16, the reason why I rate it slightly above 2K17 for alley-oop controls is because on NBA 2K17, I feel like because of the brick wall defense, players are getting caught on each other too often, right? You'll think that a player is coming in baseline and he's going to be able to, he's making a cut baseline and you're going to be able to throw him a lob and he's going to dunk it, but he's hit by a defender who's not even in a good position to stop that forward progress, but he hits a brick wall and then the ball goes sailing out of bounds. On NBA 2K16, the defense is a little bit more realistic. There's not as much bodies catching bodies, etc. So, yeah, I rank 2K16 slightly over 2K17. But for me, those are the best in the 2K series.
I mean, they've got to be up there for me as well. 2K17 is one that I had in mind from so many sessions of 2K Pro-Am in that game back in 2016 and 2017. And I do have a fair amount of highlights saved from that time. They are saved from the PS4's internal capture, though, so they are 30 FPS. Unfortunately, might have to send a few of them through to you to see if they can be cleaned up. I'd prefer to send new highlights through for the top 10 every week, obviously, but I do have some pretty nice alley-oops to the guys. Ben with his slashing build, his dunker build, barreling down the lane and me just tossing up a lob from half court or close to it and for him to throw it down. Very exciting, very satisfying in 2K17. I have to mention 2K14, Derek. Look how much I'm enjoying throwing lobs to Terry Hansen and anybody else who runs to the rim in my NBA 2K14, my career. That's really ranks up there for me. What I do prefer about 2K17 is the controls. Being able to double tap, triangle, or Y, as the case may be, as you said. Such a better way of throwing alley-oops than holding down the trigger and the shoot button. It doesn't happen very often, but the potential is there, and it's also there when you have to press pass and shoot in a couple of games. I think 2K13 was pass and shoot to throw that alley-oop, or a couple of games around that time. And if you're not precise enough with that double press, the press of the two buttons at once, it is very easy to just toss a pass or put up a shot from a place you don't want to be putting up a shot. So those controls, not the best. Compared to double tapping the button, a much better way of doing it. Like you said, when NBA Live adopted that, made it much more fun to throw alley-oops in that game as well. But with that being said, 2K14 is definitely up there for me. And I'd probably have to agree with 2K16 as well, though I will also mention 2K6. Not the best animations. The controls are okay. It's the modifier plus the lead pass button, but I really do enjoy throwing alley-oops in 2K6, as you've seen from my footage. And I just uploaded a matchup from 2K6 featuring the 97 Bulls versus Rockets makeshift minimalist modding roster there. That was a lot of fun to play with and put together. But yeah, 2K6 has kind of been up there for me as a personal pick anyway.
2K6 was really rough around the edges dunking-wise because of the way players just unnaturally so often launch themselves off of 2 feet from all different areas of the floor. They definitely made the dunk animations look better in 2K7 moving forward. So, Andrew, let's get to the worst alley-oop mechanics in basketball game history, according to us. And of course, once again, I stuck to the NBA Live and the NBA 2K series. So we're going to start with NBA Live. Number one is actually NBA Live 2000. I know that you can kind of throw them using direct shoot if you have that mapped on PC, kind of throw them a bit on console, but it just feels so underwhelming. You just really, the control isn't there, but then it kind of is. That's why I have to include it, because technically you can throw them. They don't work very well. They don't trigger when you want them to. It feels very, very random.
Yeah.
And the second game on my list is actually NBA Live 2001. And NBA Live 2001, I threw a couple alley-oops to Live 01 legend Nate Stasio when we connected. It was between Grant Hill and T-Mac, and then vice versa, I believe, on the second one. A little bit more control than NBA Live 2000. You can kind of throw them when you want to, but it's still really rough around the edges, and it doesn't trigger still the majority of the time when you want them to be thrown. And then 3, Andrew, NBA Live 10 such a nightmare most of the time. You have to wait for the recipient to be basically right under the hoop in order for him to catch it and actually dunk it. Otherwise, he'll jump and the ball will bounce off of him, or he'll jump and he'll catch the ball and land, or he'll jump and catch the ball and throw up this awkward adjusted layup for no reason with no defense around him, etc. I think NBA Live 10 overall has pretty damn poor alley-oop mechanics. It's one of the biggest weaknesses in that game. I think Live 09 is slightly better in that regard, but it's still pretty poor. But yeah, so for the worst three in NBA Live history, I would say probably NBA Live 2000, Live 2001, and NBA Live 10.
Yeah, I have to agree. Yeah, that is one of the unfortunate aspects of what is otherwise a really good game, NBA Live 10, and a game that I really do enjoy. The alley-oops are not satisfying at all. In fact, when I went back and played the demo, it was surprising to actually throw a couple of alley-oops that worked. So I think the final polish and a couple of the official patches really did ruin alley-oops, as we've said before. We did have that one game, Nuggets versus Magic, where we just kept getting alley-oops over and over again, and we were very surprised, and we may have figured it out, but it's not as consistent, it's not as strong as it needs to be, for sure. In those early games before we had the dedicated alley-oop control, very hit and miss, direct shoot, as you say, does work okay some of the time. And when you do pull it off and it does work, it's nice and you appreciate it, but it's just not consistent enough. It just doesn't work well enough to really rely on it, to really enjoy it as much as we should. I pretty much have to agree with all of those as the worst. I will throw out NBA Live 15 and 16, not so much mechanically, because the controls work, it is satisfying to throw lobs, but they're all those high-arcing lofts into the rafters, catching the alley-oop on the way down. It's not as satisfying.
Why? I don't understand that.
Yeah.
Like the arc on those, it's so unnatural. The ball doesn't the ball doesn't move appropriately from the sender's hand. It like floats up through the air, high arcing. Like it ruins the look, because when the recipient actually catches the ball and throws it down, it looks good.
Yeah.
Right?
That part.
But it's everything it's everything in between. It's everything in between. I completely agree.
And look, it is nice that mechanically it works. You can actually throw lobs compared to other games where they just sail out of bounds too much, or the players otherwise mishandle the ball, or it's throwing to a player in the mid-range for no reason and they're doing an awkward slow-motion layup. Looking at you, NBA Live 10, obviously. But yeah, that arc, that weird lofty arc into the rafters and catching the alley-oop on the way down, almost an offensive goaltend, offensive interference, actually. Yeah, it just does take something away from alley-oops in 15 and 16.
So the worst alley-oop mechanics in 2K history. This was tough. I actually had to go with NBA 2K6 through NBA 2K8. And the reason why is because of the launching that I talked about, right? The awkward transitions from when the player jumped to the rim, and the fact that they're like off of a launch pad. It looks so unnatural. And that actually is in all three of those games. They kind of started fixing it, starting with NBA 2K9 moving forward. So I'm just going to say 2K6 through 2K8 with an honorable mention to every NBA 2K that has had that damn dunk meter.
Yep.
Now, I do want to point something out. I love the way alley-oops look in all the games that have the dunk meter on PS5 Gen. I think they look awesome. Like the dunk animations, the way the ball goes through the air to the recipient, it looks awesome.
Bounce off the floor,
that stupid dunk meter, but that stupid dunk meter that you can't remove, that there's no option to remove, and that if you're not playing on PC and using a mod to remove it, you're basically stuck. And the meter is large. And I know you hate it because you think that it's an unnecessary step in the alley-oop process, right? And I think that a lot of gamers agree with you. That part has actually grown on my brother and I. We like the challenge of timing the because we play co-op, right? We like the challenge of timing when we catch the ball and when we flush it, right? But we're also using a mod that removes the meter on PC, right? Yeah. So we don't have that ugly visual. If we had to play on console, we probably wouldn't be throwing alley-oops as often because of that stupid, large, ridiculous visual.
So
I think they should do away with it. It's so distracting. I think they should do away with it. There should be an option for us to remove it, just like with the other UI right? So, yeah, honorable mention to every NBA 2K with the dunk meter.
Yeah, that's easily my least favorite. And I see your point about giving the recipient something to do. I still feel like it's a bit of a unnecessary QuickTime event. I'm probably never going to be a fan of it. I think that we should at least be able to disable it offline if we don't want to play with it. If you want to say, we need a skill gap online and it has to be there in online play, well, I'd also say fix your servers so that it's so there's not as much lag and so that you can actually time a QuickTime event quickly and in time, just putting it out there. But it is something that you should be able to disable offline. And people can talk about skill gaps and get good at the game. Look, if you're playing offline, play the game you want. Enjoy the game how you want. It should be a fun experience. It's not about elite competition as much as they want to claim that the online scene is elite gamers. As you know, that's a whole other topic, Derek. But I do think it should be possible to disable it. Unfortunately, it's not. I just don't like it as a concept anyway. And look, I did say that NBA 2K6 is one of my favorites because I enjoy it so much, but I can't disagree that mechanically it has problems. Those launches don't look as good as other games. It's the obvious reference for me to make, Derek, but Bart vs. the Space Mutants, right? Horrible mechanics, but I'm still kind of nostalgic for it because I can make it work, at least for that first level anyway. And it is a much better game than Bart vs. Space Mutants anyway. But I kind of enjoy it despite the flaws, but I can't disagree that it is among the worst, more objectively, mechanically. So I'll have to agree with your choices there. And I also want to throw out as an honorable mention the NBA series by Sony on PlayStation 3, holding down the trigger to send the players to the rim and toss alley-oops and then press one of the pass buttons. The fact that it's very easy to mix up that trigger with turbo. That's what happened with me in NBA 07. Remember that half-court lob I threw with the 2007 Bulls?
Yeah. I also want to point out that the alley-oop animations on the NBA series are not strong either. They're actually similar in a way to mid-2000 2Ks as far as like the launch pad look. They look incredibly awkward. So yeah, they don't have that going for them either. So let's get to the community responses. Stasho Bro at Nate Stasho, NBA Live 01 Legend states, NBA Shootout is pretty bad. Some of them don't even have that option. Then he states, NBA Live consistently had user-friendly alley-oop buttons in their golden age. And I definitely agree in that, that mid-2000s golden age. I'd say even Live 2004, which I mentioned, a few too many missed easy alley-oops. Still strong alley-oop mechanics. Live 2005, Live 06. Yeah, that was a good time for NBA Live.
Yeah, second golden age, as I've said before. And look, I'll throw NBA Live 2003 out there as another game that's fun to throw alley-oops in. It's not my desired pace. There are some issues with gameplay that I'm not a big fan of. I know that a lot of people are nostalgic for the big blocks that send the ball to the opposite baseline, and I enjoy them for what they are, but it wasn't what I wanted out of a 5-on-5 sim game. But I will say the alley-oops are pretty strong.
T. Gentry at Bucky T states, great topic. I feel overall 2K16, 17, 19 has the best alley-oop mechanics that made sense. So again, on the same page, right? I mean, me and Bucky T, I feel like would get along really well in real life because we have very similar opinions on basketball video games. He also states, however, when you executed them well in 2K13, 14, and 15, they felt really good. I can definitely agree there. He states NCAA Basketball 10 and Live 10, and even the earlier titles for Live had the worst alley-oop mechanics. So right on par with what we said.
Yeah, and it really is the total package, obviously. You want the animations to look great, you want them to feel satisfying, to be able to pull them off in a logical situation. You shouldn't be able to make alley-oops every single time, just like you shouldn't be able to make a shot every single time. That is not realistic in a sim game, and it's not challenging either, but you do want them to work when they logically should, with players who should be able to throw and catch them. And that is what makes the games with the best alley-oop mechanics so strong in that regard. You want those mechanics to work. You want the controls to be logical and feel good. That is the downside of the 2K13, 2K14. It's fine. It's not the most complicated controls, obviously, but it's not as good as double tapping the button.
So I gotta agree with Roger Ward here about Live 2002. Here is his response. So obviously Roger Ward, he's the one who came up with this question. Live 01 Legend. He states, NBA Live 2001 and 2002 had pretty weak alley-oop systems. He states, sometimes in 2002, a random pass would lead to a thunderous alley-oop, and you have to pretend that's what you meant to do. 2K14 and 2K19 were the most satisfying for me. Live 2002, those random alley-oops, right? You'd think you were either throwing it to the wing or you'd be thinking you're dumping it into the post. And all of a sudden, your recipient jumps up and throws down a thunderous oop, and you're like, oops, well, I didn't mean to do that. And that happens a lot in Live 2002 when I play it. So I'm not really a big fan of random alley-oops. So I understand where he's coming from there. So good point there, Roger.
Yeah, I have to concede that point. Even though I did mention 2002 as an honorable mention, bringing in the alley-oop button, that was a big step forward over the prior two games, 2000 and 2001, using direct shoot and not that effectively. But yeah, some of them are not that great, and you have a similar issue to 2004 where you do miss a few too many dunks, too many finishes do get blown, and there's no slider to fix that, or try to fix that, as there is in 2004. So, no, I see it, but I'm still kind of nostalgic for alley-oops in 2002. But, again, I do have nostalgia for games that are definitely flawed, and can acknowledge the flaws at the same time, so fair point.
Moving over to the NLSC Discord, Vetman states, 2K20 was the last 2K I remember where alley-oops just kind of worked. And to your point, that's your favorite alley-oop system, right? Where you don't have the meter, where you throw it and the recipient catches it and he flushes it without, this quick time event.
Yeah.
That takes place. Juicy Shack Meat states, NBA Jam and NBA Street have the best ones for me. Just wait for a teammate to start to the dunking action and pass it to them to score. I mean, yeah, the reason why I can't really include those is because you have so much time to time those. When the player goes up, he's hanging there in the air and he's jumping about 20 to 30 feet, right, off the court or off the blacktop, etc. And you throw it to him and they throw it down. So, I don't really include arcade games in this, but to his point, not all arcade games are equal with oop mechanics, but NBA Jam, the good ones, and the NBA Street Series have been historically strong with their alley-oop mechanics. He also states NBA 2K23 and beyond have the worst with the quick action alley-oop button. So he also hates the meter.
And yeah, honorable mention to the arcade games as well, obviously. It was a huge deal when alley-oops were added to NBA Hang Time. Really enjoyed that. NBA Jam Tournament Edition is one of my all-time favorite basketball games, arcade or sim, and certainly it's up there as among arcade games, but you don't have the alley-oops. So when they add them in Hang Time, and they're in future Midway titles as well, so satisfying, as well as NBA Street, obviously. Because, again, you didn't have that manual control in a lot of the sim games at the time, so being able to simply run and press shoot and jump, or have the CPU go up and be able to throw it in the pass like that, was very satisfying at the time. And as far as more recent arcade games, look how much fun we have with NBA Jam on Fire Edition.
It's always a blast. Vetman also continues, and kind of, again, to your point, he states he doesn't like the functionality since the meter was put in place, and he said it feels like micromanaging. Careless XCI says, the best one is NBA Hang Time. Worst, I'd go with NBA Live 2004 to 06. Alley-oop layups from 16 feet are the worst. My opinion on that is you probably shouldn't throw them when the player is that far out. But I do agree that it does happen a little bit too often in those games. And, when you think about a player running towards the hoop in real life, you do want to throw the oop earlier because of your distance between you and the recipient. And you want him to be able to, basically catch up to the ball. So I definitely agree that happens too often in those games.
Yeah, and it's one of those other issues that ruins alley-oops in games, that logic, the recipient logic. And if you have a couple of players who are fairly close together and close to the rim, some games will throw it too often to the player further back, when clearly you want to throw it to the player right at the rim, and yet it still selects another player. Live 10 particularly bad about that, as we've said. But it makes me think, Derek, that has been a recurring issue. They've never found a way to combine direct pass or icon passing with alley-oop passing, and that is kind of a problem, because that would really solve the issue of making sure you're throwing the alley-oop to the player that you actually want to lob to.
But I also want to make another point about what Careless XCI stated. He said, 16 feet from the basket. 16 feet from the basket is kind of around the free throw line. So technically, if you throw an oop and there's a player who has momentum going towards the hoop, and, you throw it when he's around that 16 feet mark, he should be able to continue forward, catch it near the hoop, and throw it down. So I just want to make a point. I do not disagree with you. From a real basketball standpoint, those should work the majority of the time as long as the recipient, is a good leaper, is a good dunker, etc. So, Andrew, we do have a response on Facebook, and I know that you have that in front of you.
Yes, and this comes from Renee, who also gave us the other topic suggestion. Thank you once again for that. Renee says, NBA Live 10 alley-oops felt really fun. So, a contradictory opinion there to ours. And I will say that when they work, they're really satisfying. You could say that about a lot of things in video games, obviously, that when it works, it's good. When it doesn't, it's really horrible. But yeah, when they work in NBA Live 10, as they did in our recent session, yeah, it is satisfying. They do look good. We had that really good one to J.R. Smith where he went up and finished it with one hand and took a bit of a tumble afterwards. That looked really cool. But for the most part, yeah, that hasn't been my experience.
We completed 5 alley-oops in that game, which was awesome and very rare. We also had one nice one to Birdman, who threw it down with 2 hands. So, yeah, not my favorite, but I definitely see where, if you can figure it out, if you throw them, when the recipient is right under the rim, why that can be rewarding.
And it is so important to get alley-oops right, such a fundamental play. So it is really important that we've been able to do that on the virtual hardwood. Yes, you can do that in games like Live 95, and those alley-oops feel very satisfying, and they look pretty good too for the time, Derek. But not having that manual control when you want and know that you're throwing that lob and make or miss, that's what you intended to do, is so important, such a big development for controls and mechanics in video games.
So thank you to Roger Ward for the topic suggestion. Community got into this one. It was fun putting our list together. And like I stated, Renee, we will get to the Q&A on next week's show. But yeah, keep the topic suggestions coming.
Absolutely, and kind of makes me feel like a celebrity, Derek, getting Q&As.
Can't beat that.
With that being said, that has brought us to the end of this week's show. As always, thank you for tuning in, and please join us again next week and every week on the NLSC, nb-live.com, our YouTube channel, or wherever you listen to podcasts. In the meantime, make sure you're following us on social media. That's so we can get in touch with us, and of course, stay up to date with all of our content. So Derek, go ahead and plug the handles.
Yeah, you can reach me on X, formerly known as Twitter, at D43G and at D4384. I'm also on the NLSC, D43, and on YouTube, D43.
As for me, I'm Andrew in the forum and Andrew NLSC on X and Blue Sky. The NLSC is on X, Facebook, and Blue Sky at the NLSC. We're also NLSC Basketball on Instagram and Threads. We're on YouTube at NBA Live Series Center. And of course, keep it locked to the NLSC itself, nb-live.com, for everything we do for basketball video games. So, thank you once again for tuning in, and until next time, I'm Andrew.
And I'm Derek.
Go get buckets, everyone!